Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of History After Hours. My name is Kevin Pumphrey, and with me, as normal, is Mr. Jeremy Nixon and Mr. Ron Franklin, some history teachers from Lakeside High School in Hot Springs, Arkansas. On the podcast today, we spent about half the time talking about our new educational environment that we find ourselves in with the quarantine, and the other half is about the political and social stuff that has been happening this week. It was a informative podcast. I learned quite a bit, and I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Thank you so much to Abby Hanks for producing this whole thing, and for everybody who listens. We appreciate that. And this is kind of the end of the year podcast for us. As far as the school year goes, we might still do some podcasting during the summer since we have this whole new digital thing going. But anyhow, I hope you enjoy the podcast. Okay, we are live via Zoom once again in our quarantine podcast situation. So let's talk about the end of school. We are headed into the summer. We're nearly done with grading, most of us, I assume. And we've got technically, I guess, one more day of school left. But this is kind of we usually do an end of the year podcast to kind of wrap up the school year. This is a little different than previous years because we're doing it digitally. Just kind of summarize, give me your potted view of this whole thing from us going from the classroom 1 week to the rest of the year. What's kind of your overall vibe? All right, next question.
Okay,
I don't even know.
Yeah, we've talked about this a little bit. This is not my preferred method of delivery. I'm glad that we had this option. I'm glad that we were able to put all that together really quickly. And I don't know what next year is going to look like if we have to blend this in, or if it's, I don't know. I'm sure there'll be some type of incorporation, because I doubt that everybody will feel comfortable by August going back to school, or can't, maybe because they have, health issues that could be extra compromised, if they face large crowds. So I'm kind of torn about that. I don't like sitting down and teaching. Like I jump, man. I move around constantly, and it's part of just how I do that, and I feel it works best. So we're really limited to this little screen, but at least we kept going. And I had so many kids, because I always do this thing at the end of the year where I have them write out a response to, it's like almost like a survey, I suppose. But what did you learn, and what was really impactful, if anything, and what would you say to kids coming in next year, or what would you say to yourself? Give yourself advice if you could go back and tell yourself that, and then critique me, like, what could I do better, right? And there were so many who said, we appreciate the fact that you kept going, and it was hard for them too. A lot of them didn't get to leave the house. Some of them, I think, still haven't left the house. Some were here or there, with a limited capacity to see friends or whatever. But that sense of normalcy helped a lot of them, from what they said. And so, like I said, I'm proud that we could continue in some sort of form or fashion. But golly, I just like being in the room better. We'll do what we have to do, right? But
yeah, Nixon.
How about you?
Yeah, I don't even know if I can sort of accurately reflect on it yet. It's been so surreal. I miss the classroom. I miss the interactions. We've talked about that before. In some ways, I feel like, I don't know, I kind of feel like a gyp. Like, I feel like I gypped the kids, because I know that the transition to this digital learning was not smooth. I know that I did things that weren't great, that I could have done better. And it's about, hopefully if we have to do this next year, I can improve on it. But I'm still in that kind of weird, I don't know what to make of it. I think there were some good things. I think there were some bad things, but overall I want to get back into the live classroom.
Yeah, I think overall we've probably really stretched teachers to kind of dig into their toolbox, maybe learn some new skills. It could help a lot of teachers being able to do more stuff digitally now, combined with the classroom if we can. What's going to be interesting is if we do get to go back to school, and something that Ron, you brought up was the teachers that, because of the virus, maybe next semester, maybe next year, don't feel comfortable going back to the classroom. As an administrator, what do you do with the teacher that doesn't? Would you allow them to deliver all their content digitally and just have that class completely online while other teachers are going to school? Then you have students who have autoimmune deficiencies that are vulnerable, and asthma and all the other things. Do you allow them to participate at home? Just like, I guess you probably have no choice in that matter. It's going to be a crazy year if we don't have a vaccine, and if we have another wave, and there's this potential.
I'm kind of worried about how they're going to determine who gets to stay or who gets to come to school, and do they get to choose that on a daily basis? And do you get a doctor's recommendation? What do? You just take the parents' word for it, take the kids' word for it? Oh, today I'm going to do online learning. Well, I don't like the idea that they could flip flop back and forth. I think there needs to be some standard for us and them. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, the optimist in me says we can get back and do those social distancing things to the best of our ability, and be cognizant about hand washing and that kind of stuff. And hopefully we can avoid some sort of wave, or spike inside the school systems. But the pessimist in me is just sitting in there shaking his head, going, man, I don't know how what I hope is that now that states are reopening, and ours including, I hope that within 2 weeks past Memorial Day, with all the gatherings and stuff that happen, for sure, in 2 weeks, if we don't have some massive calamity, then hopefully that's a good indicator that maybe we can do more, and maybe we don't have to opt. Maybe it's safer than we think. Mm-hmm. I don't know that. I want the CDC to be involved. I want the state health officials to be involved. I want the governor to make good decisions. I want the school boards to follow that too, and I know we are. But I don't want to be running scared the whole time, and one kid sneezes and we shut down the school district.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? But right now tensions are high and people are edgy, and some people on both ends of the spectrum, by the way, some are taking it way overboard, like, oh my God, I can't see people. And others are like, man, it doesn't matter. We're all good. Hey, if I get it, you get it. We're all good. So where's the balance? Yeah. Right.
I think that's part of it. Is we're so binary, or it's either this or this. There was a virologist who released a reopening plan while we're in these kind of unsure moments. And his take was, if you get the virus and you're asymptomatic, you generally have 3 days before you start to spread it. So his option was, when you reopen, why not reopen for 4 days? Then you close down for 10, then reopen for 4. Now, I'm not saying that's ideal, but his argument is, if you reopen for 4 days, you can kind of keep the economy rolling. And I'm thinking more at school, like you do have those days in the classroom. Then you shut down for a period of 10 days, that anybody that's infected is now going home. Keep it from spread. If you do that a couple times, then your immunity overall is built up from the people that did get it, yet you limited the spread of it. I don't know if that made sense, but I don't know that that's even feasible. But it does seem like it's either we're opening up or we're not. And I know they're having partial openings, but even partial openings, if you're doing it every day, maybe some brief shutdowns and then reopen for a while. Maybe that is a strategy. I don't know. Anybody, have y'all heard anything like that?
No, that's new to me. I mean, I don't know. Who was the guy?
I saw it on a TED Talk. It's like a real recent TED Talk. A virologist who had him and a few other scientists got together and said, what is the most optimal way of opening up and keeping the ball rolling, yet limiting the spread? And it was the 4 days on, 10 days off until we get through it, or until there's a vaccine that can limit it. So I'm wondering, that seems logical to me, and I would rather do that than not do it, like Zoom forever. Like, I mean, and once again, I'm thinking of our professions at school. I would rather go 4 days on and a week off, or 2 weeks off, and then 4 days on again, at least to see the students face to face for those who are healthy, than than just start the year like this. So I don't know if that's even, I'm sure there's way smarter people than me working on this. So I'm hoping some solution like that might be viable.
You think that there's also going to be some way of checking people at school, like how often are we going to do temperature checks? Who's going to be in charge of that? Is it going to be something the office is going to do? We have nursing staff. Are we going to be responsible for some of that? How I wonder what we'll see when the time comes about what our responsibilities will be as classroom teachers if we go back into the building, which I think we will to some capacity.
Yeah.
But then what do you do? How do you watch? We need to be, I mean, we're not going to be trained to be medical professionals, obviously, but we need to be aware of what to look for, as part of stewardship.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my big question right now, that because I do think we'll be back in some probably limited capacity. Like, what are the responsibilities going to be? What does it look like? We have so many open-ended questions right now, and no one really talking about it, which kind of worries me because I'd like to know, because one of the things that's bothered me about all of this is consistency. Like, at the very beginning, you didn't know what was happening and you didn't know what the plan was. And I still feel that lack of consistency with, oh, well, maybe they'll come 2 days and then maybe they won't be there. Or maybe they can pick and choose how they come to school. I'm just ready to hear something. But that's just me.
Yeah. A consistent standard is going to be difficult. And this is the one problem I had with this whole system here the last couple months of school was not every student was held to the same standard. Some students attended every Zoom session. They did all their assignments on time, submitted everything. They did everything we could ask them to do. Some students didn't do anything. And yet at the end of the day, the student that didn't do anything got chance after chance after chance after chance. And the student that did everything perfectly wasn't really rewarded for doing things perfectly, other than maybe the stress of procrastination. I think
we've got to fix that. If we're going to do a blended model, like that has to be corrected, and I'm not saying, hold feet to fire, that kind of thing, but at the same time, more than what we've done this time. I think there was this floating expectation that, well, I'll get it done when I get it done, and it doesn't really matter. It does matter, and timelines are important, and if nothing else, just from a motivation and a work ethic standpoint, there needs to be a sense of urgency in your academics. And right now, the way we've had to play this, because it was so sudden and we didn't have a plan we did, but we had to throw it together. We had to make some allowances, which they are going to have to tighten that down, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm wondering, like, we try in education to be very objective. We have this very A, B, C grading system. We have all this, but that's when all the kids are in the classroom. It's pretty equitable. Like, we're teaching all the kids pretty much the same. Home environments vary so radically that you wonder if they're going to come up with some sort of varying grading thing, maybe giving the teachers a little more power to determine what kids are doing, what they, because obviously we would know better than anybody else what grade that kid deserves. And maybe it doesn't have to necessarily be on standardized tests and formative assessments. And maybe you can take more variables into account, like internet access and home life and the, work ethic and the, maybe the obstacles. It's one thing for an only child with great internet to do it than one of 6 kids with all fighting over the same device. You know what I mean? I don't know how that works, but
my fear is, though, that even the kids that are generally go-getters academically there's been this demotivational factor that's snuck in on even those kids, so I know everybody has their own way of approaching things and everybody has their own unique home life situation, but even those kids that were standout kids, on time, head up, charging forward, very driven, like even those kids saw that moment of it's just dragging them down. And so I worry, we've got to have a good, strong plan in place so that because then you think about the kids that were maybe mediocre in their approach or lackadaisical in their approach, and you compound that now with the possible depression of being at home all the time or whatever else, right, that they may have to deal with. And so, like I don't want to lose people, Sometimes the only thing that's keeping kids through is coming to school and seeing somebody that can motivate them face to face, eye to eye, and connect with them, human to human. Like, I'm afraid we're losing that if we're not careful.
Well, one of the most, excuse me, frustrating things for me was not just consistency in that way, but the ever changing, like, oh, we're going to take attendance this way and then that way, and then we're not going to take late work. It's our normal policies. Oh yes, we are taking late work, and we're not just taking late work, we're taking late work forever. The lack of consistency for me on just classroom policy, because I felt like I was contradicting myself every week, and then what credibility do I have? I felt like I lost kids as the weeks went by with every change, because they realized, I don't have to do this.
Yeah, I'm hoping that's what they'll use the summer for, is to figure out a plan.
Yeah. Most of my kids held on till the end, but I had some that were really just drifting away, so.
Yeah, I mean, the psychological effect of being thrown into this and being at home, that was a big thing for my kids, just doing schoolwork from home. It just, like, especially for hours, not just a little homework here and there, but now the whole bulk of everything they're doing is at home. And it's a very different feeling doing it at home, especially if you're laying in bed, halfway paying attention. I just think there was like you said, a motivation that just went sideways for most kids.
The state has an online program, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I can't think of the name of it right off the time, but I mean, the actual state of Arkansas has an online curriculum. Yeah. Arkansas Connections. Thank you. If we go to this blended model, I wonder if they're going to say, okay, if you choose this route and you can't come to the building for whatever reason, you're on that program. And then, and then maybe you stay on that program. I wonder if we're doing that, or if we're going to, and see, that's something that's just up in the air. We don't know yet. What are we going to do for the blended kids? Are we going to continue to develop? I mean, are we going to have to split our time and go, here's a classroom and here's that online version of us? Here's the work for them. Here's the work for these guys, because it can't necessarily be the same every time. Hands-on activities or group discussions are going to be different for, or are we going to have to have streaming lessons for the kids at home, or what? Do you guys have an opinion on that? I think maybe separate curriculum might be better. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I felt sorry for all those teachers that had to develop AMI packets to mail out, to develop, that are written, not digital, printing out, for 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 kids. That seems like a crazy hassle. Now, if you're talking about splitting your class between, you got kids at home that you got to figure out stuff for them, and then you're going to be teaching your kids in class differently. Yeah, I can't imagine that situation. My classroom was flipped anyway, so a lot of the kids did a lot of the bulk of the reading and stuff on their own. But what's different was my class was really based on consistent evaluations in class, like reading quizzes and things, plus discussion. And you can't do either of those through Zoom very well. Testing security, of course, is a huge issue, and discussions are, what that was like. So I really, it came down to just classwork. Just if you just submitted your classwork, you were fine. And that doesn't really show learning as much as what we were doing. Like, if I can hear you talk to me about the subject, that's what I depended on to figure out if a kid knew something. And so I don't like this if it's just going to be about submitting work,
Yeah, I agree. And as far as the curriculum part of it goes, just the teachers that I talked to that from former districts and that I know, we were the only district I heard that actually kept moving forward in teaching new things, in teaching new content. So my question is going to be, if they do sort of an Arkansas-wide curriculum, is it going to be the same? Or are they going to try to, I don't want to say water it down because that's not the right word, pick and choose? Are they going to cut some things? What is that going to look like, and how is that going to affect us, not only preparing kids, but then if we're doing pre-AP, what is that going to look like when they get to AP, like the long term of this?
Right.
I'm worried about that.
I don't know. And teaching writing, that was a big struggle. Like, at least I had most of the school year to teach writing. So I didn't have to, because we had talked about just about everything before this happened. But I can't imagine a situation where I'm having to teach writing through this, it's just so much easier to do it in person and correcting on the spot and writing on the board and having the kids write a thesis and share it. And I can't imagine doing that digitally. So yeah, I have no answers for any of that.
I wonder about those states. We had our consultants who are from the West Coast talking about how like states like Oregon and California actually just stopped delivering new content the entire fourth quarter. Where are those kids going to be in comparison? They've missed. What are you going to do? You can't do anything for the seniors who are, they're going to, if their college opens, then they're going to go in with a limited knowledge base and skill base perhaps. Or let's say that you've got, sophomores and juniors moving up into high school, into 11th, 12th grade. And then now you've missed content there. And now the teachers are going to have to backtrack and say, well, here's what we didn't cover. And so, and I know some of us are facing that too. But not to the same degree. I mean, as far as I know, most everybody I talked to said that, yeah, we kept going forward as best we could. I wonder about that situation.
And I think that'll be worse or better depending on the subject matter. Like if you're in AP Calculus and you missed the fourth 9 weeks, that's probably a big deal. History, you can probably make up some of that content a little bit quicker. It's more skill-based stuff. I think that's really going to hurt them. So math and science, those things come to mind going into college and trying to figure that out. Yeah. I don't know if there's a remediation.
Just for my ninth graders, just for my ninth graders, skill-wise, the writing part was where I know I was getting frustrated, so I know they were getting frustrated. Just the transition to, hey, you're going to have to do this in 10th grade, and you need to start thinking about the point of view, and you need to get out of this first person mentality, and you need to stop, the I think and all of that. And they're going, we hate this, we don't do this. I'm like, you do now, but it's in the last month of school, and I'm not there with them, and it was tough for both sides. I know it was.
Yeah. It's harder to create a sense of accountability this way. Don't you agree?
Yeah, I mean, it's nearly impossible to hold all the students to the same high standard that we would like to. Like I said, hopefully smart minds will come together in the summer, develop some contingencies, and we'll have at least a clearer vision of some standards we can put forth to the kids so we're not contradicting ourselves every 3 days on what the protocol is.
You said something about testing security too. I mean, we found out pretty quickly that there were chat room things going on and TikTok videos about here's exactly how you get around the testing securities on different platforms that we were trying to use. And so you're like, well, now what? So I don't want to have to be constantly chasing down kids saying, is this, I don't want to fear that this is their own work. Right. I want to trust that you have done your thing well, but I don't know in this format, if I got you in the classroom, like I've got more control over that. But here, I can't see what you're doing. I can't see what isn't it weird? Because you can, like in the classroom, you can actually see what a kid is thinking, right? Yeah. Even if they're not looking directly at you, you can sort of see the physicality. Online, I have no clue. I can't read them hardly at all. If I can even see the top of their heads, some of them have been that, you get that Kilroy thing. Sometimes that's the best you get.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so much nonverbal that goes on in a classroom, and your teacher sense can just automatically kind of sense who's cheating, the wondering eyes and the stretches and all that. I mean, like you go, okay,
Well, I can't see if they've got another screen open. I can't see if they've got a split screen going on with me. I can't even tell if they're listening to what I'm saying half the time. So that's what I'm saying. I'm sort of dreading this. I'll make it work as best I can, but I just don't know that if we're going to have to do a split thing. If I have a class that has kids in the classroom and kids at home in the same class, how do I don't know how to do that yet. Yeah. Hopefully I'll have some epiphany and some guidance.
Yeah. I mean, if we're live streaming lessons while we're also teaching children live, I don't know. I don't even know how I'm going to split my focus like that. I can't even fathom it at the moment. I'm just going, So I'll do what I have to do. Like you said, I'll make it work, but right now, I just don't know.
Yeah, hopefully, we'll have a few more answers. We have way more questions than answers right now for the future of education, and hopefully some of those questions get answered over the next month or two before we go back full force in August. I do kind of want to switch gears now and talk about some of the craziness that's going on, Minnesota specifically. What happened? What's going on? And is this a anomaly, or is this going to get worse? Opinions?
All right, so it's only been a couple of days. A guy named George Floyd there in Minneapolis was pulled. He was actually in a car. I saw the video. I haven't seen any body cam video yet, but I saw like establishment video and then bystanders. Apparently, there was some sort of forgery in progress that the police were called out to, and then they pulled over a car and he was one of the occupants and they handcuffed him. And then I don't know where it transitions, but somehow or another they end up with him on the ground by the squad car, handcuffed, and one knee on his neck, sitting there for about 10 minutes or so.
Yeah.
And him pleading with them the whole time, I can't breathe and let me up please, and bystanders begging them to let him up. And then the next thing you know, he's dead. He was unresponsive when the paramedics got there, and they said that he died en route to the hospital or at the hospital, but I don't know. I mean, obviously I wasn't there, so I can't tell. But so the man's dead. And there's how many are on the list just recently? It's another unarmed black man who's been taken out by seemingly in a weird way. I know the police aren't vigilantes, but it seems irresponsible, at least just from what we've seen, that they would sit there with their knee on his neck and not even pay attention to how he was actually, he expired. He died. And so now people are like, well, he was murdered, or I think even the mayor came out and said this was murder. Police officers lost their job, but there have been protests, and then last night they turned into riots.
Right.
And the riots spread apparently too, not just in Minneapolis, but also I saw a report on BBC that Chicago, there were protests, solidarity protests, same thing in Memphis, same thing in parts of LA. And I don't know, we'll see what tonight brings, but there's been anger and looting and burning and pillaging and violence against individuals apparently. And so it's weird to watch the different reactions online in social media like Twitter. People are venting their anger and their frustration about the system that seems to be continuously racked against certain minorities in this country. And you want to have solidarity with people who feel oppressed, and but then you get people on the other side who go, well, you shouldn't be looting, you shouldn't be burning things down, how does that help your cause? And then others go, well, it's not about the looting, it's about the venting of anger, and it's about a way to get attention. And so there's so many different attitudes and positions on that. So, but the man's dead. There's going to be an inquiry. FBI's involved, yeah.
Yeah. It's multifaceted, but to the question of is it an anomaly or is it here to stay? It's here to stay. That's what I really do believe. And until we start addressing systemic problems in a real way, other than lip service, it's going to continue. And it's hard to when you talk about the violence and when you talk about riot and looting, it gets very, very complicated. But the root of it is what's happening in America that's been happening in America for a long time. And I had someone made a comment comparing, well, if you look at the demonstrations at the Capitol buildings, where white people had the assault weapons in the Capitol buildings, and that didn't turn violent. Okay, true, but let's flip that. If you took, I don't know, the NAACP in the 1950s and you armed them and put them in a Capitol building, what's going to happen? We're getting a lot of
what did happen
comparison
in California with the Black Panthers in the 1960s, right? There were gun legislation that popped up. So there's We have evidence about
Yeah.
what happened. You know, there was a clear
Yeah.
slap against it. So
So, you know, I see both sides digging in to their sort of, I don't want to say talking points because that feels like it minimizes it, but you know what I mean. But until we address it in a real way, until we acknowledge that it's a problem, yeah, I think it's going to stay.
And you know, what's interesting when you look at this whole thing, because obviously this scene has played out time and time again in the past. I thought things had always kind of slowly been getting better. And if you look back at history, probably it has. Obviously, things are magnified. You get to know every little story. I mean, just the amount of lynchings that have occurred in the past that no one had heard about, you know, what cops did in the 50s and 60s that no one ever knew about. I mean, obviously, I think things are getting better, but we still have this big problem. And I think the future of this has to be I mean, I don't know how to get there. I don't know that there is a governmental action that can bring us to a point as a society where these problems don't exist, where
well,
race doesn't matter,
from
where,
listening
but
from listening to the NAACP and the Black Lives Matters folk, one of the big things that would help to bring at least uh, more prudent conversation is the idea that you're going to hold people actually accountable for actions like this.
yeah,
And again, I don't know the circumstances. I wasn't there. It's going to have to be brought before a jury, maybe even a grand jury, right? To hand down indictments, and just because they lost their jobs doesn't mean that that's the end of it. Uh, and it shouldn't be. They need to investigate why this man died, and was it excessive force? Was it police brutality? Police brutality is a real problem in this country, and I don't pretend to know the depths of that, and I don't know what each individual officer does, and I know that the protect and serve. See, we're getting that weird balancing act, right? I understand the officers that I know go off and they risk their lives and they do their job every single day to try to protect and serve the community. Would any of them get caught up in a situation where somebody might end up getting hurt, and then they have to defend themselves? Like, I have no idea. So I have to do it individual case by individual case. But this overwhelming, seemingly number of occurrences of young men who are, well, just black men in general, who face discrimination and then being pulled over by the cops, and racial profiling and all those things. Like, that's real. And I've had kids in class who don't understand that. Kids who've come from a white background, suburban, let's say. And I had this conversation about 3 or 4 years ago with a young man. He's like, I don't understand why people don't. I think it was like during one of the first Black Lives Matters protests. I don't understand that. I was like, well, because you don't have any idea what it's like to live in this particular community. You don't know what it's like to fear the police officers. You don't understand what it's like to feel that the system doesn't support you. You don't understand what it's like. And not that I do either, but I'm trying to give the other side's representation to him. And he's like, well, and he goes, well, I don't see why people don't like police officers. Like, well, you've never been in a position where you would need to fear them then. But that doesn't mean that you get to judge someone else's reaction to that. You need to try to understand it, is what I would suggest.
Yeah, that's what I'm. Yeah, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
I was just going to say that's kind of what I was trying to say earlier. I didn't do well, but the idea that you're taking and comparing to someone else and saying, oh, well, it didn't happen this time, but you're not putting yourself in their perspective. You're not putting you're coming from a place of privilege, and you're not putting yourself into the historical, and not even just historical, the actual practical systemic problems that are ongoing every day. And until we do that, yeah, nothing changes.
Yeah, look, it's such a complicated issue, and race is not the only factor. It's multifaceted, like you say. But when race is the issue, it definitely sensationalizes it, brings it to the light, right? You have I saw one study where white cops are actually less likely to shoot an unarmed black person because of the fear of that all this brings, the media attention, losing and if they shot an unarmed white person, you wouldn't get the attention. They wouldn't, it's such a complicated thing. I think you're both right, but I also think it's a shame that we don't have progress, or it doesn't seem like the last few years have brought any progress in this matter, because we have been talking about an incident just like this so many times. And you're right. What some of these inner cities have brought with them, and the fear of the police, like you talked, the psychological stuff that goes on, plus the police officer training in situations like this. I don't know how much of a factor that plays in, but I
Well,
know.
I saw a thing on the news last night where they interviewed one of the Little Rock police officers about this particular thing in Minneapolis. And they said, "Is that something that you guys were trained to do?" He's like, "Nope, we are not trained to do that." And I'm not sure why he would have done that. And we're going to use an incident like this to better inform our officers on what not to do. And I don't know if is it just a matter of training? I don't know how long this person's been on the force, or actually there's 4 of them, I think, officers that have now been fired. The one who had his knee on the neck. Will the others face potential murder charges as accomplices? I'm not quite sure the legalities on what they're seeking. Do you know, Nixon? Have you heard?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think there have been any charging decisions made, but I can't see the other 3 being charged with the same level as the guy with his knee on his neck.
It looked horrible. I mean, it was just a horrible image.
And ask you about, because if they end up going to trial, which I'm going to make a presumption that they will over this at the state level, and maybe, I know there's a pending federal investigation as well. With the idea that you have to be proven guilty in a court of law, I think that there's this idea too, and I've heard people speak about this, that maybe even prosecutors won't prosecute to the full extent because this person is a police officer and maybe he's been on the force for multiple years. Again, I'm making sort of pronouncements. I don't know the details. So there's that. But I also wonder about the mayor coming out and saying, this is murder. Like, aren't you setting up potential problems for a jury pool? Aren't you tainting people's opinion by saying that? And isn't that a problem? And couldn't that be some sort of technicality that ends up getting them freed, even if they are guilty? Like I said, and I'm saying even if they are, because you have to say, right, because it hasn't gone to trial. Again, yeah. I'm not making judgments. I'm just.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of ways to look at that.
How problematic is the mayor saying what he's saying is what I'm asking.
Yeah, I mean, it's problematic because, look, legally, if I'm the defense attorney for the police officer, I am going to say, I can't get a fair trial for my client here. There's no possible way. And, then you might move for a change of venue, but then it's a national story. So where are you going to go that you can get a fair trial? And you're already building in that grounds for multiple appeals. And not only that, if you switch to the political lens, the mayor is putting himself in he's in a catch-22, because if you look at past instances, like Buttigieg had a problem with this in the 2020 campaign, where he wouldn't call on, I don't have the details really present in my head at the moment, but he wouldn't call for an immediate firing when there was an investigation of an incident similar. And politically, the outcries, do more, say more, you're the leader, lead. But legally speaking, it impedes the process of investigation, due process, and essentially possibly even a fair trial later.
And don't you do a disservice to the office that you're holding, because your job is to, he's inserting himself into that situation. Like I said, I agree it's a catch-22. He needs to say something to try to show people that he understands their anger. But at the same time, you actually may be causing more problems down the road, right? I don't know that was the right approach. I'm not a politician, so.
Yeah, it wouldn't have been my approach, but I would never be a politician. So, yeah, I get why he said what he said. He's on the political side of it, and he is trying to sort of heal the wound.
He didn't even say this seemed suspiciously like murder. He said very pointedly, "This is murder. These guys are
Yeah,
murderers."
he said if you or I had done it, we would be arrested and charged with murder. And so, and I get again what he's saying, but legally speaking, that doesn't help. And prosecutors, and Kevin was talking about, or I think it was Kevin, this a minute ago, the idea that prosecutors and police work very, very closely, and there's a symbiotic relationship there where I don't want to like tarnish any office by saying they look out for each other, but historically we've seen that they look out for each other, and so that can get problematic too. Is the prosecutor going to prosecute? If they don't, why did they not? What were the circumstances? Are they, is it a career guy? It's
How far away could
bad.
you actually move if you were a defense attorney? How far away would you want to move the venue? How far can you? I don't even know. Can you move out of state?
You can't move out of state. It would have to be in state for the state charges.
Oh, right. Well,
But yeah, I mean, you're going to argue that you can't get a fair trial, that they've made it impossible.
and according to the Constitution, let's just be clear, they deserve a fair trial. If they're indicted, they deserve a fair trial. You're charged, you deserve a fair trial just like anybody else. And if, for some reason, even if it's a technicality, they are not convicted, right? It's just going to, and so how do you get a fair trial? Because there's going to be this fear that that's going to ignite even more unrest, because then people are like, see, I told you the system's rigged. I told you.
Yeah, which is why it's sort of doubly dangerous for the mayor to use sort of the language that he's used.
Yeah, to compare, the officer to an average citizen doing that is also not a great comparison. I mean, we give our police, our military, some protection because they're facing these situations. They have to have more protection than somebody like me going out with a gun and trying to make a citizen's arrest or whatever. It's a complicated issue, and I hope that we take these situations like this issue by issue instead of blanketing all officers is bad or the whole police department is bad. I mean, it gets on my skin, and this is a very much less serious thing, but you guys hear this a lot. Other people, talking heads wherever, going, well, teachers just don't teach our kids history anymore, or teachers don't teach civics anymore in schools, or they don't, these are people that are nationally known and they just make these statements. And I'm just going, I do.
We have a failing school system. No, we don't.
Right.
No, we don't. There are other places where things are not going well. Yeah. Are we as a nation failing young people with the education that we're giving them? I just don't see anything that really says that. Are students facing multiple challenges in trying to receive the information that school systems are trying to give to them? That may be true. Society itself is changing. Is there an emphasis on education at home? Are there multiple detractors to keep you from accessing education an appropriate way? Do you live in poverty? Do you live in a dangerous neighborhood where you can't concentrate? Are you safe and secure at home? Do you have all those basic needs met? I think that those issues are much more prevalent when we're speaking about the nature of education in this country. But I can't stand politicians to say, our country's failing, we need to fix education. Education would be a lot better if politicians would get the hell out of the way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so if I'm a police officer.
Corporations. The corporatizing of the American education system is problematic.
We've seen
I'm
that.
going to say that point blank right here.
Yeah, I mean, any of these broad stroke things, all police officers, all teachers, all education, I mean, it's way more nuanced than that. And I think this ties into the polarization of our politics. You're either all with us or you're on the other side. There's just no compromise. I mean, our whole system was built on compromise. If you think about how our whole government works, it's based on compromise. And it seems like compromise is getting less and less and less. And these broad strokes, and it's all or nothing, and everything is either yes or no. That's not healthy for any of these situations. It just inflames the situation.
Yeah, and the polarization, as a government teacher, it makes it so much harder for me to teach effectively. So, you want to talk about the failing education system, point that finger inward, man, because the more you say crap like that, the more you are divisive, the harder my job is. Because when I try to approach from both sides or from a middle perspective, all that nasty rhetoric fills the room. And
Are you shocked by how much or how often you hear people just parrot whatever the leaders on their particular side say, and it's just almost verbatim, just blah, 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 blah. I mean, they just echo it right back out. It's this weird, and maybe it's always been that way, and I'm just more aware of it now because it's so much more pointed and polarized. But there is, it's like your little minion sometimes saying whatever it is that the leaders on the left or the right are saying, and I'm talking about the extreme left and right too, particularly.
Well, I'm shocked by some of the major Republicans doing the gymnastics to parrot what Trump is saying. And they were so far apart when, most of the major Republicans that you think of when Trump became president, they didn't even want to endorse him, but they have moved his way, just like the extreme left has drawn some of the more centrist Democrats. I mean, just take Biden's latest gaffe. If you have to think about who you're choosing between Trump and me, you ain't black. It's like, what do you say? I mean, that's not good either. Both sides are being pushed further to those extreme corners. And yeah, I mean, there's no nuance in any of this. And it is incredible how you hear these catchphrases, the fake news thing. Like it really did come to my attention when Trump started saying it. And now it's like no news matters. It's all fake. And we just live in a land of no news. It's just weird how some of these parroting just phrases become reality. People say, well, Twitter's not real life. No, but it shapes real life. And if you hear it enough and you see it enough, it kind of does start to, become reality. It's weird. Well, I do want to end a little bit with Trump and Twitter, biting the hand that feeds him. If anything made Trump the president, if any institution, it's his vehicle of communication, which is Twitter. And recently, Twitter, okay, I thought, oh, well, that's pretty good. But now thinking, Twitter, are they a news? Are they going to be vetting everyone's news? It's insane. And then Trump's reaction, of course, is insane. What do you think about Trump and Twitter and his executive order? And
yeah, clarify what he's reacting to.
So apparently Trump had tweeted about the fraud or corruption of mail-in ballots. And then under that tweet, and I haven't even seen the original tweet, but I've seen some blurbs of it, Twitter, whoever Twitter is, posted a link that basically took you to an article that directly refuted what Trump had just said. So it's like a fact-checking thing, which they've never done before. Yeah. There's no telling how many misinformation and falsehoods he's put on Twitter, right? And they haven't done.
Yeah, they've never done it to him before. They've done it to other people before, but they've never done it to him before.
So that's a big step. And of course, Trump's reaction was
when I heard that they did that to him, I knew he was going to snap back. Didn't you?
Oh, he always does. He can't let anything go. Yeah. I mean, it could be the most insignificant insult ever, and he's going to snap back. He's going to say something. He always does.
But this time it's an executive order, and there are so many legal and political issues that raises, that his snapback is creating. I'm not going to call it a constitutional crisis because I don't think it is, but it's an undermining of the First Amendment. It's undermining of congressional power, federalism, and it's a huge power grab by the executive.
I don't think we actually said on here what his executive order is supposed to be. Like, what is it?
Well, and he hasn't published it yet. Washington Post ran a story that said they got an early draft of it, which was basically what he's supposedly going to do is try to reinterpret Section 230 of the oh Lord, what's the name of the law? It's like it's a Communication Act from 1996, and I don't remember the name of it, that basically said internet providers are sort of immune, not just providers, but people who publish information on the internet are sort of immune from liability for false things or not slander, but the veracity of what's being said. And they can kind of, it lets them police themselves. It lets the internet be the internet.
Well,
right? It's the government.
Twitter's a private enterprise,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And so what the executive order apparently is going to say is that to push the FCC and the FTC, I think, to maybe look for a reinterpretation of that law and to start regulating more along the lines of, I don't know if it's going to be like print media or broadcast media, but we'll have to wait and see what the actual language is. But
part of his anger was this idea, and he's been dropping these hints for a long time now, that social media and platforms like YouTube and whomever, if they remove anybody's voice, like it's part of the deep state conspiracy to prevent conservatives from continuing to be successful in politics or whatever. Like that was part of his charge.
Yeah, well, he says it's not fair. He says Facebook and Twitter and those are, liberal companies. They shadow ban conservatives. They can't get their message out. But there's so much hypocrisy in even the thought of an executive action. I don't even know where to start with it. But we'll see what he does, and we'll see if he goes through with it or not. And
at the end of the day, how much authority would an executive order have? Like sorry, Twitter, you can't fact check me. Like, is that even possible legally?
Well,
even
I
with
don't.
An executive
order? That executive order. No, could he theoretically direct the FCC and the FTC? He's not supposed to be able to, because they're supposed to be independent regulatory agencies, Democrats and Republicans together, outside of his.
Supposed to be.
And so they exist in their own little bubble. It's still executive branch, but they're supposed to be somewhat away from his control. And then they would have to go along with what he wants to do. And look, the First Amendment starts out, Congress shall make no law for a reason, because they're the ones who control things like that, who make laws, not the president. That's not an executive function.
I can kind of
yes,
see
there
this,
are executive orders, but
I kind of see this just Trump being Trump, a little bolsterous, saving face, trying to show that he's going to do something. I probably think it's not going to go anywhere, just because if you do this to Twitter, then there's so many that opens up, like you said, just the can of worms that's never ending. I've heard people in the past say, well, Twitter should have a long time ago just removed Trump because of their own, if you look at the agreement you make on Twitter, he's violated it a million times, but because he's president, they've kind of overlooked a lot of the stuff. So I don't know. They probably regret doing what they did, but I wonder if they'll do it again.
What's the long-term end game for him, though, with this? Is it just another distraction? Is it just another, hey, here's something sparkly, pay attention to this, and not the COVID-19 response criticisms and all of those things? You think that's what it is? Just another distraction?
Yeah. It's a rally the base election strategy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he's getting his people to try to fight censorship with censorship. It's really on that level sort of amazing.
Yeah. It's funny. He rallies his base by attacking his own White House guidelines on COVID. It's just like the White House believes this, and then Trump will attack it to keep his base intact. It's weird. We live in Never Never Land.
Refusing to wear the mask thing.
Yeah, like that's one of the White House guidelines, and I wore it backstage. How do I need it now?
Well, conservatives have fought for the rights of corporations and business for so many years. Money is speech, corporate money is speech, but now Twitter can't regulate its platform. Like, what?
I know. It goes against.
It's like what you were saying earlier, to watch them sort of do, somersaults to run around in his position, because most of the things that he's done that are controversial are not conservative, but they're falling in lockstep behind it.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, that was fun, guys. That's the end of the year podcast. I mean, I guess now that we're doing it digitally, we can just do it through the summer as crazy things
Yeah.
happen.
End of the
But-
school year. Next week, what summer opening
Yeah.
summer podcast.
All right, guys. Well, we will see you, and that is History After Hours. Goodbye.